Hello everyone. Before I begin, remember when I said this? Well, as I started writing the script for this video and started researching, it got a bit more complicated. So anyhow, let's start the video. Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about the OP10 leader Usopp and the intricate interactions with him and cost gain or reduction. This video can get a bit complicated, and I will try my best to properly word everything. So let's dive in. First of all, what is the issue? Well, the question arose, what happened if Usopp has a character on board which cost was reduced to 2? For example, take Cavendish, whose cost would be increased to 5 through Usopp's effect. Now you reduce this cost by 3, so Cavendish becomes a 2 cost. But he would become a 2 cost only because Usopp is active. If Usopp was not active and would check now, he would technically see a 1 cost. So would he fulfill his own condition somehow and leave Cavendish at a 2 cost, or is there a priority system in place? Or something entirely different? This led to the developers updating the Q&A for OP10, which answered a few questions. Let's go through them. The first question is about Tsuru's on play effect, which reduces a cost by 2, which apparently processes later than permanent effects. So in this case, Usopp has priority and the cost of Bartolomeo will remain at 2. We note that one down and go to the next one. The next one does talk about another auto effect, but here the cost is reduced to 1, even with Usopp's ability being active. This apparently means the permanent effect checks applicability again and sees that Usopp's ability should not apply to the character, so the cost becomes 0. Next, this one talks about multiple permanent effects affecting each other. Here, the Isho player is the turn player and resolves first, so Usopp will not apply. Apparently there is a turn player priority when it is a permanent effect affecting each other. Interesting. So these are the 3 questions that got answered, but after this I'm still missing a few things, like what happens if you buff the cost of your character but it drops off at the end of turn? And what about activate effects like Van Algar? Which priority does it have? Luckily, there are answers to almost everything. The comprehensive rules have had a massive update. The updates explain how Usopp works, but I will end the video with one thing that is still not clear to me. There are a multitude of rules that have been created, adjusted or expanded upon. For Usopp, however, there were 2 rules which stood out to me. So let's scrap them. 814. 814 states that now there are 2 types of effects, continuous and one-shot effects. It seems that this differentiates effects like kill a character as a one-shot effect and effects like give something minus cost, and effects like blocker Sabo as continuous effect. As all effects can be described as either a one-shot or continuous effect, permanent effects also seem to fall under continuous effects. For a complete comprehension, I would need more cards like Usopp, so I will not dive into this subject too much. Permanent effects now also have a new rule, which is 81335. 81335 reads, and I'll read this with you, if a permanent effect changes its own impact on the game or that of another permanent effect, the following order is used to process the changes, taking into account any continuous effect that have already been resolved. 1. The turn player processes their permanent effects in any order. 2. The non-turn player processes their permanent effects in any order. 3. If steps 1 and 2 change the game's state further, repeat the process until no further changes occur. So what we have here is a rule that describes how to process permanent effects when there is a change in a permanent effect that affects specifically another permanent effect or itself. This also means that introducing continuous effects such as cost reduction will not affect the processing of permanent effects. So this counts for auto effects, activated effects, and events, as well as anything else that is not a permanent effect that affects the other permanent effect in place. Besides this, any new permanent effect that would affect another permanent effect will keep all resolved continuous effects in check when assessing priority. Small note is that I noticed, even though the Q&A states that the permanent effects are processed first, the rules do seem to differ a little bit somehow. As in, there would be no processing of Usopp's permanent effect when an auto effect or continuous effect like Tsuru is introduced, according to rule 81335. In the end, the result is the same, so let's focus on that. Let's put these rules up against the Q&A and see if we can make it make sense. I know I just gave this example, but just to make it all clear, we would have an already applied effect of Usopp and have a non-permanent continuous effect like Tsuru be introduced. The permanent effect of Usopp is not reassessed, so therefore the cost will remain at 2 as the ability resolves. The question regarding Kaku is the same as Tsuru. A non-permanent continuous effect is introduced. Usopp was already applied, but now the cost is below the applicable condition for Usopp. So Usopp here somehow sort of checks again and the buff to cost would drop off. This makes sense intuitively, but I so far failed to find a comprehensive rule that would support this. So keep in mind that Usopp's effect is not applied anymore if the cost drops below 2, even if Usopp's effect was already applied. The third question regarding Isho is a perfect example of 81335. So let's grab that rule and follow the steps. 1. The turn player possesses their permanent effects in any order, so Isho reduces the cost by 3. 2. The non-turn player processes their permanent effects in any order, so Usopp is not applicable anymore, so no buff to cost. 3. Steps 1 and 2 do not change the game state any further, so the process is not repeated. Now what is unfortunate is that it doesn't give answers to more complex examples. This leaves some questions unanswered. I told you I would give you an example where I still miss an answer, though I would have an idea of my own on how to answer them. So here it is. Usopp has a base 4-cost Dressrosa character like Cavendish on the field. Usopp would make this a 5-cost through his effect. Now Helmeppo is played, or Van Augur is activated and reduces the cost by 3, making it a 2-cost as Usopp is already applied and non-permanent continuous effects will not interfere with the resolutions of permanent effects. Now Isho on the field is given a Don. Here 81335 would check and have Isho be in effect first as the turn player has priority. So here's the first question. During this check, is Usopp seen as already applied while doing this check between permanent effects? Doesn't matter for this example, and it probably is yes, as it would probably be a continuous effect, but I cannot find an example where it would matter. So it's just a question for some other time. Next, Isho reduces the cost to below 2, meaning Usopp is now not applied. The cost of Cavendish becomes 0, but remembers the cost reduction by Helmeppo, so it's kind of like a -2 cost. Now say you have a full board and play something and therefore trash Isho. This means 81335 comes up again as there is a change in how permanent effects affect each other. But I'm not sure if Usopp is or is not applied before this check happens. I think not, but that is just an educated guess. So what would happen is that Cavendish has a -3 cost from Helmeppo, which has already been resolved a while ago, and 81335 does say that all the applicable continuous effects are kept in check. Usopp checks if he is applicable to increase the cost. Now, here it does depend if Usopp somehow was applied or not. If applied, it will remain a 2 cost, but if not, it remains a 1 cost. I would not see why Usopp would now magically apply, but it does mean that the introduction and removal of a permanent effect changes the board state more than just the effect itself, which is interesting. Will this scenario ever happen? Very much unlikely. So luckily, so far most major interactions are all taken care of and answered. I also still have questions around the interaction between Usopp, a 1-cost Dressrosa character such as Rebecca, and the I have my crew buffing her above 2. Here we can use the Q&A for Bartolomeo and Kaku to safely assume that Usopp will apply the moment I have my crew resolves. But I wonder what happens the moment it falls off. Will Usopp's buff remain, or will it just drop off as well? The developers answered this question as no, Rebecca will become a 1-cost again, but I failed to find a CR rule or a Q&A that supports this claim. If you can find it, please let me know. Now, another small thing that I would like to add is that there have been a few questions about how Usopp works when there is a card that is returned to Usopp's hand. If he would activate if he has started with 5 cards in hand and with the card returning back to hand, making it 6. Well, the activation timing for Usopp to activate is a card being removed. for this example being bounced back to hand. This means that that check happens at that point. However, the check to see if the condition to see if the effect will completely resolve, having 5 or less cards in hand, is checked during the resolution of the ability. And the ability can only resolve or even activate when the previous ability has been activated and resolved. Therefore, the ability will resolve, of course, but you will not draw a card because of the fact that you, at that point, have 6 cards in hand. That is all. I will make an advanced fundamentals video covering all the complexities around permanent effects when everything is clear, so if you don't want to miss that and other stuff that I make, please make sure to like and subscribe. I am the Flying Judgment, and thank you for watching.